Good morning, everyone. And welcome to this service of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Grand Traverse. My name is Beth Strawbridge, and I serve this congregation as a member of the Sunday Services Committee. Again, I say welcome. Welcome to this morning, this day, and this opportunity to be together in community. Whether you are joining us via live stream or are here with us in our beautiful sanctuary. It's a gift to look out and see the familiar faces of the members of this congregation. And we are always delighted to have visitors as well. If you are visiting or have been away for a while and feel comfortable to introduce yourselves, we invite you to do so. We welcome all into our church and look forward to getting to know you. So please, if you are visiting or would like to be recognized, join us for coffee and fellowship after the service. If you take a yellow mug, we can easily identify you and greet you at that time. Sharing our joys and concerns with our beloved community helps us stay connected in caring and in celebration. For those of you here in the sanctuary, there is a book to your left where you can enter your message during the prelude. Your joys and concerns will be read by Reverend Alex later in the service, so we encourage you to write legibly. To express those joys and sorrows that you are holding quietly in your hearts, you are invited to light a candle at any point during the service. Later in the service, we will be hearing words from Brian Stevenson, who is the Executive Director of the Equal Justice Initiative. I have twice heard Mr. Stevenson speak in person, the first time as a keynote speaker at a convention of the American Library Association. As I listened to his powerful speech, I could only wish that my daughter, who was in law school at the time, could hear him. As it turned out, a year or so later, he gave the commencement address at her law school graduation. I think you will be as moved as I was to hear him speak. We are about to enter sacred time. As we start our service, I invite you to set aside the busyness of your daily life. Please silence your cell phones that we might bring our full attention to this time together. Center yourselves as we listen to What Wondrous Love, performed by Julie Gaubitz.
Whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here with us this morning. I'm Reverend Alex, the senior minister here at UUCGT. I use he and him pronouns. And I invite you to rest in this moment as we hear these words from the Reverend Dr. David Vreeden. Welcome to this place where equity and justice transcend mere dreams, where they are the air we breathe. Enter this sanctuary, all who yearn for respite from a world rife with scarcity and inequity, rife with the relentless shackles of privilege and bias. Come, embrace this space, be embraced by this place, this refuge where scarcity and disparity dissolve into we, together, crafting a place where the breath of life is equity and justice, cherished, manifested, and sustained. Come, let us worship together this morning.
We light our chalice this morning, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, with these words. In the few moments that we have here together this morning, let us open our eyes and our hearts to a reality that continues to grow and scar our nation. That is, the structure of our penal system that causes a blight.
These words are from Armando Valladares, a Cuban artist who spent nearly 22 years in prison for expressing his views. Freedom of expression. When I draw, it is like a voice is shouting inside me. Ali Farzat was a Syrian political cartoonist whose work earned him death threats. My hand is not the color of yours. Oh, freedom through equality. My hand is not the color of yours, but if I pierce it, I shall feel pain. If you pierce your hand, you will also feel pain. The blood that will flow from mine will be the same color as yours. I am a man, the same God made us both. Chief Standing Bear was a Native American Ponca chief who died in 1908. He won a lawsuit against the U.S. Army for ejecting his people from their homelands. Freedom through peace. Human beings have the right to pursue happiness and live in peace and freedom. The Dalai Lama. The 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, Buddhist monk and spiritual leader of Tibet, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent struggle for Tibet's liberation from China. Freedom to be yourself. If I am different, I make no apology. And I hope that others will have the courage to be themselves and stand up for what they believe in. Fight for those who need protection, love who they want to love, and be proud of it. These words are from Claire Balding, a leading broadcaster, presenter, and writer. Freedom to enjoy life and liberty. Oh, I will love the day when I break out of this cage, escape this solitary exile, and sing wildly. Nadia Anjuman was a poet and journalist in Afghanistan. She was killed for shaming her family by writing poetry about the oppression of Afghan women. Freedom to have your own ideas. I know what I want. I have a goal, an opinion. Let me be myself, and then I am satisfied. Anne Frank. Anne Frank was born in 1929 and was one of over 1 million children killed in the Holocaust in 1945. While hiding, she wrote a diary that was discovered after her death, which has become one of the most famous diaries in the world. Freedom to make a difference. It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. Chinese proverb and Amnesty International's motto. This Chinese proverb inspired the founding of Amnesty International and is the reason they use a candle as their logo. All right, my friends, are we ready to head down to Sunday school?
please join me in singing the children's benediction. Go in joy, go in peace to meet the day. With open hearts embrace life's wonder. We will guide you, we will love you on your way.
Good morning. I was asked to speak about why I love this congregation and why I support the pledge drive. Price and I joined the UU Fellowship in April of '83, 4 months after moving here from the Northville, Plymouth area. Until that point, our Watts family, 2 of us, and our 3 children were completely unchurched. How could we and why would we make a major decision like joining the UU so quickly? Well, because when we walked through the doors at the UU building on the corner of Washington and Rose for the first time, lovely music, a good message, and congregants who warmly greeted and welcomed us made all the difference. We were connected. That warmth and the connectedness is still very much with us today as we reach out and include all seeking a spiritual home here. Why has this congregation meant so much to me over the years? And why has it remained so relevant and comforting in times of joy and sorrow? In the months before Price's strength and energy weakened and he passed away in January of '23, this congregation immediately came to support me and my family, and you offered care, gave needed hugs, sent notes of condolence and memory, brought meals to our home, and provided wonderful food and hospitality for Price's celebration of life service. I'd like to mention several people at this point. Laura Kyneth. Not only did she and her team do an excellent job with food and table decor, but she adjusted her own birthday plans and grandchildren playtime that day so that she could organize and manage hospitality for us. Mary Ann, Shelley, and Cindy, our talented trio, sang. Charles Brackett photographed the service and made digital copies. I then sent to friends and family unable to attend. And Reverend Alex was very, very special for me in developing the program, leading the service, and just being there. It was truly a celebration of Price's life and a congregational effort. What can UUCGT offer for your personal enrichment and pleasure? Throughout the years, special activity and interest groups have formed. Bowling leagues, hiking and canoeing groups, summer outdoor picnics, holiday parties, folk dancing, exercise classes, Wednesday potlucks, book groups, soul matters, peacemakers, P-I-E-C-E, Buddhist meditation, Santa Diva, a Buddhist study group under the leadership of Chris Innes, a discussion group after Sunday service after the service with coffee in hand, the OWL program, basketball team, UU arts and craft classes, music and the vocal ensemble, movie nights, community forums, ice cream socials. What are your interests and what would be spiritually uplifting and meaningful for you and perhaps fun? And lastly, work projects outside our congregation make us shine. sharing, affirming, and acting on our UU principles. These have included yearly road cleanups in Peninsula Township, tutoring students at several elementary schools, supporting a young girl in Guatemala, that was Mary Van Valen's undertaking, supporting women in Africa, and that was Kathy Prentice, marching for women's rights, letters to the editor, supporting the LGBTQ community, working at Safe Harbor twice a year, and making and serving Tuesday lunches for those in need at our former church on 5th and Oak for 17 years, Mary Kiner. There are many, many ways to engage your heart and soul at UUCGT. So, with the possibilities for participation in community building, please realize that money it takes to pay our wonderful and highly qualified staff, keep our building and grounds in good shape, and to shine as a welcoming congregation. Think with your heart and pledge until you smile. Thank you.
And now it's time for our offering. As we consider our gifts this morning, let us bear in mind the reaches of each contribution. Contributions on one side of our baskets are for this congregation. These perpetuate our ability to maintain our fine staff who guide us and in our quest for understanding ourselves and others. Our staff also serves as the bulwark of our activities here, including our Sunday morning gatherings. And how could we meet and administer our programs without this building that surrounds us? Like your own living space at home, there are maintenance needs, which perhaps we don't regularly think about. The other side of the basket supports our outreach. Those funds allow us to recognize needs outside our UUCGT community and reach out with support. Who are we if we don't see needs and opportunities beyond our walls? If you are not in attendance, you may make a contribution by writing a check and mailing it to the church, or use the Vimo app. And this morning, we invite your pledges to be put in the basket as well on the UUCGC side. So our morning offering will now be received. Thank you.
It is our practice as a community to have time in our service for the joys and concerns that touch our lives, the moments that we've lifted up to be held in community while we're together. If you have a joy or concern that's a bit too raw or tender on your heart today to share with us in our service, you're always invited to reach out to myself, to a member of our congregational care team, or to simply hold it on your heart as you are held in the love of this community. None of us is ever meant to travel life's journey alone. And so if you would join me in holding these joys and concerns on our hearts. Mary and Dave Newhouse request your supporting prayers for our grandson Tanner. The latest scans show his cancer has spread to his spine and new areas of his brain. He plans to begin a new study regimen at the University of Michigan this week. Please bear him and his family up in your thoughts. Thanks. From Chris and Rick Walter, asking for caring thoughts for brother-in-law Tom and the medical team who will support him this week, along with his family in Indiana, holding you and Betsy close, Tom. We also hold a stillness, we hold in this stillness the life of Nex Benedict, who was a 16-year-old sophomore and Choctaw teen from Owasso, Oklahoma, who lost their life after a fight at school with bullies who targeted Nex for their gender identity. We affirm that trans lives are sacred as we mourn the loss of trans life and pray for a world without bullying and hate for trans kids, a world without hate for who we are. We hold concern for reproductive rights and freedoms in the wake of the Supreme Court of Alabama and the ruling that someone can sue over a wrongful death. We hold all of those who are impacted by this ruling and the dangerous precedent it might set for the rule of religion over reproductive rights. And now let's hold a moment of stillness for all of the concerns and joys that remain on our hearts. And as you feel called, I invite you to pray with me as we hold this time for meditation and prayer. Praying these words from the Reverend Rebecca Savage. Spirit of life, eternal mystery that holds us close, receive the meditations of our hearts this day. We come together in this quiet moment to unify our hearts again toward the clarion calls of our time. May justice and equity guide us to greater connection, a greater truth. Our part is just as great to approach dismantling systems of oppression within us in order for all of us to be free. To know that when I cherish and tend to the divine spark within me, when I know in my bones that I am worthy of love and whole just as I am, there is greater potential for mutual understanding and care. Love is not scarce. Our ability to extend compassion and grace can be. I place my hand over my heart and know I can feel the spirit of life within me. I invite you to place a hand over your heart and to feel the spirit of life within you. The spirit of life is divine within us. The spirit of life is here. This is the beginning of justice and equity when we go within in order to be of service in our communities and our world. May it be so, and amen. Let's join now in singing our affirmation that the spirit of life is here.
Spirit of life, come unto me.
In addition to authoring the widely acclaimed book, Just Mercy, Brian Stevenson is executive director of a human rights initiative known as the Equal Justice Initiative, which includes the National Memorial for Peace and Justice and the Legacy Museum, all in Birmingham, Alabama. Just reading his words to you this morning would not have the impact of his voice, which carries his passion and his urgency for the commitment to justice that is his life's whole work. So we are going to drop into a speech he delivered a short time ago. I give you Brian Stevenson.
Well, I've been trying to say something about our criminal justice system. This country is very different today than it was 40 years ago. In 1972, there were 300,000 people in jails and prisons. Today, there are 2.3 million. The United States now has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We have 7 million people on probation and parole, and mass incarceration, in my judgment, has fundamentally changed our world. In poor communities and communities of color, there is this despair, there is this hopelessness that is being shaped by these outcomes. 1 out of 3 black men between the ages of 18 and 30 is in jail, in prison, on probation, or parole. In urban communities across this country, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, 50 to 60% of all young men of color are in jail or prison, or on probation and parole. Our system isn't just being shaped in these ways that seem to be distorting around race, they're also distorted by poverty. We have a system of justice in this country that treats you much better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. Wealth, not culpability, shapes outcomes. And yet we seem to be very comfortable. The politics of fear and anger has made us believe that these are problems that are not our problems. We've been disconnected. It's interesting to me, we're looking at some very interesting developments in our work. My state of Alabama, like a number of states, actually permanently disenfranchises you if you have a criminal conviction. Right now in Alabama, 34% of the black male population has permanently lost the right to vote. We're actually projecting in another 10 years, the level of disenfranchisement will be as high as it's been since prior to the passage of the Voting Rights Act, and there is this stunning silence. I represent children. A lot of my clients are very young. The United States is the only country in the world where we sentence 13-year-old children to die in prison. We have life imprisonment without parole for kids in this country. And we're actually doing some litigation. Only country in the world. I represent people on death row. It's interesting, this question of the death penalty. In many ways, we've been taught to think that the real question is, do people deserve to die for the crimes they've committed? And that's a very sensible question. But there's another way of thinking about where we are in our identity. The other way of thinking about it is not, do people deserve to die for the crimes they commit, but do we deserve to kill? I mean, it's fascinating. Death penalty in America is defined by error. For every 9 people who've been executed, we've actually identified 1 innocent person who's been exonerated and released from death row. A kind of astonishing error rate. 1 out of 9 people, innocent. I mean, it's fascinating. In aviation, we would never let people fly on airplanes if for every 9 planes that took off, 1 would crash. But somehow we can insulate ourselves from this problem. It's not our problem. It's not our burden. It's not our struggle. Well, I talk a lot about these issues. I talk about a race and this question of whether we deserve to kill. And it's interesting, when I teach my students about African American history, I tell them about slavery. I tell them about terrorism, the era that began at the end of Reconstruction that went on to World War II. We don't really know very much about it, but for African Americans in this country, that was an era defined by terror. In many communities, people had to worry about being lynched. They had to worry about being bombed. It was the threat of terror that shaped their lives. And these older people come up to me now, and they say, Mr. Stevenson, you give talks, you make speeches, you tell people to stop saying we're dealing with terrorism for the first time in our nation's history after 9/11. They tell me to say, no, tell them that we grew up with that. And that era of terrorism, of course, was followed by segregation, decades of racial subordination and apartheid. And yet we have in this country this dynamic where we really don't like to talk about our problems. We don't like to talk about our history. And because of that, we really haven't understood what it's meant to do the things we've done historically. And we're constantly running into each other. We're constantly creating tensions and conflicts. We have a hard time talking about race. And I believe it's because we are unwilling to commit ourselves to a process of truth and reconciliation. In South Africa, people understood that we couldn't overcome apartheid without a commitment to truth and reconciliation. In Rwanda, even after the genocide, there was this commitment. But in this country, we haven't done that.
One of my first real encounters with the mass incarceration system happened during my time in college. Are you wondering where your minister is going with this? Do I have you listening? In school, we had to complete units of service learning done in service and connection with our wider community. The site I chose was the Monterey County Jail, a jail with 1,100 inmates in a facility built for 825. Far too overcrowded. The official reason that we were there was to inform visitors and families about Proposition 47, a new California law that reclassified some felonies for drug possession and petty theft as misdemeanors, meaning that if somebody had a felony on their record, they might be able to have it commuted or in some cases completely expunged. Though in reality, what we were really doing there was paying attention, speaking with families about the conditions inside of the jail, checking that the jail had accurately posted visiting hours, that inmates were able to come and see their loved ones. The stories of those visiting the jail continue to follow me, stories of mothers unable to visit sons due to language barriers, of babies and children who were never seen or been held by their parent, the strains facing low-income families making it difficult to both work jobs and make visits on weekends. My time at the jail taught me so much about the justice system in this country, revealing to me the ways that our present system is broken and far from the kind and just society that we want to create. And so our theme for this Sunday is this wider question: justice for all? We are waking up in this country to the injustices of our mass incarceration system and the ways that we think about and even carry out justice. With swelling prisons and jails, with its disproportionate impacts on Black, brown, and Indigenous people, what are the roots of such an unjust system? How did we get here, and what keeps this injustice system going? These are all pieces that I want to explore with you today with a particular lens of our Unitarian Universalist faith and our views of justice and the world that we hope to create. In this sermon, I'm going to ask us all to do something brave, something that a few of you might find too radical. I invite you to imagine a world without mass incarceration, a world without jails or prisons, a world of prison abolition, and abolishing these systems that do not serve us. In imagining this future, I invite you to consider what a Unitarian Universalist outlook on justice and righting wrongs might actually look like. How can we imagine a different world, a world with forms of justice that are restorative rather than retributive? A world in which we can lean on a sense of covenant with one another, even maintaining covenant with those who are incarcerated and those who have caused great harm. Ultimately, I argue that such a world is possible, that new forms of restorative justice are actually our moral obligation in this country if we truly and really believe in a country with freedom, liberty, and justice for all. So please bear with me. Even if you don't think that prison abolition is possible, I'm going to try to change your mind. But before we discuss the system as it is today, we must first talk about the system of yesterday, the historic roots of the injustices that we now see. Probably the biggest point to make about mass incarceration in our country is that it is truly just Jim Crow reinvented. Those of you familiar with Dr. Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, already know this. The roots of our criminal justice system can be traced back to the times of slavery and segregation. Not only does modern policing have origins in slave patrols, the patrols created to bring back runaway slaves, we can also see how mass incarceration fulfills multiple forms of legalized slavery. The rise of the incarcerated workforce, how states pay their inmates wages as low as 8 cents an hour up to 12 hours a day, a total of just under $1 a day for all of that work. How 7 states actually pay no wages at all. How if an inmate refuses to work, their action could be followed by a trip to solitary confinement, essentially forcing a person to work. The nature of our mass incarceration system is actually not to prevent and punish crime. It's to control the dispossessed, to manage people who are denied their rights and their freedoms. What is most insidious about the current system is that it appears voluntary. After all, people choose to commit crimes, and that's why they're locked up in the first place, right? We imagine that the entire system can be avoided if someone just maintains good behavior. Though the truth of the matter is that all people make mistakes. All of us violate the law at some point in our lives. Even if the worst thing we do is speed 10 miles over the speed limit, don't try to tell me that you don't speed. There are people in this country serving life sentences for crimes that simply do not warrant the punishment. In Alexander's words, it is no longer socially permissible to use race as a justification for discrimination. So we don't. We use our criminal justice system to label people of color criminals and then engage in all of the practices we supposedly left behind. After you're convicted, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, a denial of your right to vote, and any educational opportunities, all of this becomes perfectly legal. Alexander also puts it this way: as a criminal, you have scarcely more rights than a black man living in Alabama at the height of Jim Crow. Scarcely more rights. Staggering. We have not ended racial castes in America, we've simply redesigned it. And in addition to this history, we also know that the single largest factor that impacts mass incarceration is actually poverty. Our system of justice favors you if you're rich and guilty over if you're poor and innocent. The system criminalizes poverty and even punishes people for being poor. It does this by imprisoning those who can't pay the fines and those who can't post bail. Sex workers, the unhoused, and those with little access to mental health resources are also punished by this system that perpetuates the poverty it also seeks to punish. Ironically, life in prison actually fares better for some. According to Dr. Matthew Desmond, author of the book Poverty by America, many people who enter the mass incarceration system suddenly find that their health improves because the conditions that they faced as free citizens were far worse. When we talk about prison abolition, we also really need to consider poverty abolition too. As Bryan Stevenson from our reading tells us, wealth, not culpability, shapes outcomes. And yet we seem to be very comfortable. The politics of fear and anger have made us believe that these are problems that are not our problems. We've become disconnected. How is it that we are comfortable with the incarceration of 1 out of every 3 black men ages 18 to 30? How can we be comfortable with 1 out of 9 people innocent on death row, only after death discovering their innocence? As Stevenson tells us, it's truly a matter of identity. From his compelling book, Just Mercy, we hear the story of one of Stevenson's first clients, a man named Walter McMillian, a young black man sentenced to die for the murder of a white woman, a murder that he didn't commit. His trial lasting a day and a half, McMillian faced accusations of 3 white witnesses, even with multiple black witnesses testifying that he was at a church fish fry at the time of the murder. Overriding the jury's sentence of life imprisonment, the judge sentenced McMillian to death. And following 6 years on death row, Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative took on McMillian's case, discovering the overwhelming evidence of his innocence, as well as the evidence that the state's witnesses had been coerced into falsely testifying. McMillian's conviction was overturned and he walked free, though just think about all of those who can't walk free. Those who were innocent but were nevertheless put to death by the hands of the state. Fundamentally, we're faced with questions of what we see as tolerable, allowable, a question of how we even view justice. Is society today, with overcrowded prisons and so many caught up in it, who are either innocent or guilty of crimes that don't fit the punishment, is this the kind of society that we want to be? Is this what justice for all looks like? Our justice system is broken, and we can't settle for it when innocent people die for crimes that they do not commit. I want to turn now to Stevenson's overall point. We're comfortable with this system because we've become disconnected. By show of hands, how many of us know someone who is currently incarcerated, someone that we love or have had some kind of connection or relationship with? Raise your hands. Now keep those hands up. Raise your hands if you have ever known someone caught up in the justice system. Take a moment to just look at all of these hands around you. Mass incarceration really does affect all of us, and yet so many of us are far removed from these realities that disproportionately affect those who are poor, low income, and those who are Black or brown. It's in repairing our connections to one another that we have any chance at creating a system of true justice. With a Unitarian Universalist outlook, I want to reference a teaching given by the Reverend Scott Taylor on what he calls our UU eyeglasses that we see the world through. Those of you involved in Soul Matters will know this. Taylor is the founder of Soul Matters, the program that we use here at UUCGT with the different monthly packets, themes, and sharing groups. And Taylor mentions how a UU understanding of the world differs from the mainstream, and especially from mainstream Christianity. That the main problem that UUs seek to heal is not people struggling with sin. Rather, it's people struggling with separation, with broken hearts. In a world full of disconnection, Unitarian Universalism offers a spiritual teaching around healing our connections to life, ourselves, and others, and welcoming one another to experience life's goodness. The truth at the heart of this, at the heart of our universalism, is the truth that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. We Unitarian Universalists believe that no person is too far gone to be worthy of love, that there's always a possibility to do better, to face those that you have wronged, and to try again. The world we need to build is a world of healing our connections for all who are impacted by poverty and injustice. While there are many incarcerated who are innocent, there's also the reality that there are some who we view as a danger to society and to others. What might a justice system look like with an architecture not to punish those that we deem dangerous, but rather might bring those same people back into connection? As Stevenson tells us, the power of just mercy is that it belongs to the undeserving. It's when mercy is least expected that it's the most potent, strong enough to break the cycle of retribution and suffering. It has the power to heal the psychic harm that leads to aggression and violence, abuses of power, and mass incarceration. We Unitarian Universalists need to imagine a future with just mercy, a future without iron bars, death row, solitary confinement, and zero chance at redemption. In order to build a world of restoration and healing, we have to be willing to love, to show compassion and mercy even to those who we don't believe deserve it. We can't settle for a system that takes the lives of innocents, a system designed to keep people poor and incarcerated, especially our BIPOC loved ones and neighbors. The UUA's common read for this year, On Repentance and Repair, by Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, offers a medieval Jewish lens on repentance that I find compelling to restorative forms of justice. A recipe for repentance offered by the philosopher Maimonides, it follows a simple 4-point process. First, a naming of the harm that was caused. Second, a change and transformation of one's actions. Third, an acceptance of the consequences and any restitution. And fourth, an apology for the harm that was caused and making different choices for the future. Notice how this recipe centers around restoring relationship and connection with someone that we've wronged or harmed, rather than jumping to an apology or straight to retribution. This is the kind of justice and connection that our world needs, the kind of world where we loosen the bonds of injustice, where we undo the straps of the yoke, and where the oppressed can go free. A world where we share our bread with the hungry and make housing for the unhoused and clothing for the naked. We don't get to that kind of world without both justice and mercy, without new and radical connections to one another, even to those who we might believe are too far out from love's reach. So to close, I dare you to believe in such a world. Our faith tells us that repairing and restoring connection is the most powerful tool that we have in healing our broken hearts. Our work for justice itself requires a repairing of connection for both the oppressor and the oppressed, for those with the means and those without, for those who have caused great harm, and for all those who have been wronged. We cannot settle for less. There is simply too much at stake. So what can you do to change our present system? Use your influence wherever you have it to demand a different justice, a merciful justice. Open your heart to the experiences of those whose lives that are so different from your own, but who share your humanity. Tear down the walls that enshrine segregation in all of the varied ways that we continue to see it across our society. And lastly, join abolition movements to end both poverty and prisons. To build the beloved community, to create a world with peace, liberty, and justice for all, we each must do our part. So I invite you to not be dismayed. A future without prisons is possible. But above all, we must believe that we are connected, that this is our problem, and that this is our shared struggle. May it be so, and amen. I invite you now to join as we center ourselves for a moment of stillness. If you would now rise in body or in spirit as we join in singing our closing hymn, number 155 in your gray hymnals, Circle Round for Freedom. A few of us will lead you in singing.
I'll lead the first round, and then Reverend Alex will join us on the third round. I should back up. I'm not saying this correctly. I'll lead us on the first round. Please join me the second time through. Then Reverend Alex will join us the third time, and Catherine the fourth. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for each soul. For all the children's children. Keep the circle home. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for each soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for each soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for each soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
Please be seated.
We extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of love, or the fire of commitment. These we take in our hearts out into the world until we meet again.
I'll just be brief with a few quick announcements, and then we'll have you on your way. I know we're going a little bit over time, but I hope it's been a rich service for you. You can join us after the service today if you'd like, or are still kind of thirsty for more Brian Stevenson. We'll be showing a talk from Harvard Law School titled, "We Can't Recover from This History Until We Deal with It." It's about 6.5 minutes in length, and so you're invited to stay in the sanctuary after a quick moment to stretch your legs and maybe grab